Hey, what's up? My name is J.M. Chaley and welcome to my channel. This week I want to talk about swords. Well, yeah, I want to talk about swords. Or not swords. Things that aren't swords. That maybe were used more than swords and were used more efficiently, effectively, prolifically. Maybe. I'm talking about from the age of antiquity all the way through the medieval period. Swords weren't as center stage as we thought, or at least how Hollywood would have us think, or how fantasy fiction would almost always have us think. Swords were not completely alone in the spotlight. They weren't even in the spotlight as often as we're led to believe. Now, I'm not here to throw shade on swords. I love swords. I collect swords. I'm crazy about swords. You love swords. My neighbor Bruce loves swords. Well, I mean, I never asked him specifically if he did, but I assume he does. The reason I wanted to make this video is because I am just tired of seeing every single major battle on the field, whether it's depicted in a book or a movie, done with swords. Just people running at each other with swords with this much reach. I mean, it's just insane. Did it happen? Sure. Did it happen a lot? No. No. But look, I get it. When you're looking at it, especially on the silver screen, sword fighting is cool. It looks great. It's swashbuckling. You know, it's daring, it's dashing, dodges and thrusts and all that kind of cool shit, right? Pirates of the Caribbean, Errol Flynn, right? The Princess Bride, Star Wars even, right? It looks cool. Swords are very cool, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But if someone pointed me at a weapons rack with all different kinds of weapons, among them swords and polearms and Vector-Corbins and spears, and someone said, choose one weapon to fight that guy over there in melee combat, guess what I would not be picking? A sword. I would pick something very long and pointy, because I would want to be very far away from the person that I would have to be fighting. And guess what? People in medieval times felt the same way. But to be fair, that's why the sword adapted over the years. It changed, it evolved, especially as armor evolved. Swords became longer, they became thinner. It became less important to have a blade that was sharp on the side, and more important to have a nice pointy end at the top where you could stand back at a good distance and thrust. Long swords became longer. Hilts became longer to have two hands instead of one to give a more concussive smashing attack, especially when plate armor came along. It was more important to concuss rather than slash, because you were not going to cut through metal with a sword. The sword also became more elongated with the advent of plate so that you could get a nice little pointy end up into the creases of the armor and maybe gain purchase into an enemy's flesh. Gah. So the role of the sword has changed from over the years, from the age of antiquity all through the medieval period, how they were used and how often they were used. Sometimes they were just a sidearm, a symbol of status. You know, you were wealthy, you had a very nice sword at your hip. But guess what you fought with? A spear, or a polearm, or a poleaxe, or something like that. Look, swords have been around for 5,000 years. From the Bronze Age all the way through the Iron Age. In the Iron Age, they became a lot more sturdy and strong and sharper, but they've been around a long time. Why were they invented in the first place? Because they evolved from knives and daggers, and people wanted something with a longer reach. And that has always been one of the hallmarks of melee combat, finding something with a longer reach. And that's why inevitably, during the medieval period, swords fell out of favor. Other weapons were cheaper to make because the shafts were made of wood. You only needed this much metal on the end to do the damage. So you could have a longer reach, stronger thrust with two hands, you know? But let's not just take my word for it as I'm talking to you about this stuff. I have set aside a couple of documents that were actually created during the medieval period that shows how medieval warriors were armed and armored during those time periods. The first document that I want to share is called the Bayeux Tapestry, and it is a very long tapestry. I forget how many, it's like 100 feet or something. I didn't look it up before this video, and I should have, but it's a very long tapestry, and it winds and winds. If you go to the museum in France, it actually winds through the room like a snake, this gigantic tapestry, which depicts the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Now, the tapestry was made shortly afterwards, and it embroiders all the events that happened, including the battle and the ultimate Norman victory. And the other document that I want to show you is called the Flower of Battle. And this was written by a weapons master called Fiore de' Liberi from Italy. Of course, it wasn't Italy back then. It was a collection of city-states. I'll get into his stuff later. But first, we're going to talk about the Bayeux Tapestry.
All right, so here's this book I have on the Bayeux Tapestry. The tapestry is extremely long, and the book, kind of puts everything out into different plates and articulates what's going on in each one, translating the Latin and talking a little bit about the history. This tapestry was made sometime after, obviously, the Battle of Hastings, and it details events that took place between 1064 and 1066, in which not just the battle itself, but the events that allowed William of Normandy to take over the British throne. So this isn't a Bayeux Tapestry video. I am going to be talking a little bit about the tapestry itself in this section, but it's really to articulate about how swords were not the prominent weapon of the age, of the medieval age. But you definitely will see, depictions of swords in this time period. People did use swords. Look at this guy. He's taking on a bear. But let's put it in context. The bear is chained to a tree and muzzled. So this was probably some dickhead who's, trying to prove his fighting prowess by slaughtering a helpless, confined bear. Not a battlefield scenario that we're looking at here. What we see in overwhelming number are spears. Everyone has a shield and spear scenario. You have this guy is some sort of nobleman who's got a sword. You see a lot of the nobles or officers in these tapestries depicted with a sword at their side. That's a status symbol more than anything else. Believe me, the guys fought with spears. The other thing you see a lot of, just incidentally, is falcons. A lot of the nobles, you see this guy, he's got a sword at his hip, and he's also got a falcon. You see a lot of nobles depicted with falcons. That was kind of a status symbol as well. I'd have to do some research on exactly how they were leveraged in battle or used in hunting or what have you, but it's something that you see consistently throughout the entire tapestry. And again, more soldiers with spears. Here's a guy with some sort of axe, a battle axe of some kind. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a pole axe, and it's tough to tell. If that's supposed to be a tree, then what kind of weapon is that supposed to be? I mean, you kind of have to use your imagination. Riding into battle with spears. Okay, here we see a little bit of the shit hitting the fan. People are fighting, and they're coming in hot with spears. I don't know what the fuck is happening over here. It probably explains it in Latin, but it's translated over here. But yeah, I'd love to know this guy's story. So here's an interesting plate part of the tapestry here. You actually see spears flying. Okay, this is my favorite part of the Bayeux Tapestry. If you look at these guys over here, they're pointing up in the air like, what the fuck? And that's because they're pointing at this. This, my friends, is, it says here, star. That's Halley's Comet. They saw Halley's Comet fly through the air in the middle of battle. The Normans took it as an omen of good fortune, as if God himself was basically saying, yeah, fuck those Britons up. But I always thought that was cool, that it actually made it onto the tapestry. Like, they knew something was happening. They didn't understand what a comet was, but they knew something happened. And again, more soldiers, you know, with spears. This guy's got a club. I mean, go for it, I guess. Club versus spears, you know, have fun. But you get the idea. I mean, these are supposed to be like the dead bodies, right? This guy lost his head, his sword, and his shield lay at his side. Maybe that's why he died, because he didn't have a spear. You know, but this is basically, the whole tapestry is a lot like this. You see spears are the prominent weapons. Of course, we're going back to the year 1066. So this is the high Middle Ages in the medieval period, which ran from 470 AD to 5000 AD, right? Or 4999.
So the next piece I want to show you is The Flower of Battle, written by Fiore de Liberi. Now, Fiore was a weapons master. He knew all different kinds of weapons and how to fight with them, against different opponents using different weapons, whether they were on horseback or whether they were on foot, all different kinds of combinations. What the Flower of Battle was, at its very basic purpose, was a combat manual. It was a martial instruction book for how to fight, different maneuvers, where to swing your sword, how to find an opening, get a guy, whatever. He was renowned through Europe as this weapons master. Now remember, at the time, Italy wasn't really Italy during the 1300s and 1400s, right? They were a collection of city-states, and they were warring with each other. And a lot of Europe was the same way. They were still kind of pulling themselves out of that muck that was the fall of Rome, and they hadn't gotten their shit together in many parts of Europe. And Fiore's knowledge was very, very valuable, and he traveled through Europe teaching his craft, instructing. His book was very, very famous and sought after. So let's get into it. You're going to see some panels that talk about how to fight with different weapons and different styles. And you can see that Fiore was very aware that people needed to learn how to use and defend themselves from a lot more than just the sword.
So Fiore goes into everything, including unarmed combat. He wants to teach the reader how to fight with whatever they got. And by the way, the guy with the crown, he's teaching you how to fight, and that's supposed to be you. Fighting with a short staff, fighting with a dagger, dagger versus sword, sword versus dagger. Right now things are reversed. Sword on sword. Right? So of course the sword was around. We know the sword was around. I'm not trying to say the sword wasn't around, but the fact that this weapons master who put out a book in the 1400s, 400 years or so after the Bayeux Tapestry, the Battle of Hastings, and you know, we still see that there's a lot more to pick from, a lot more to fight with than only the sword. These are long swords. These are, you know, showing how to use the range at your advantage. You know, kick a guy in the shins. Why not? You block. You know, this would be a gauntleted hand where you're blocking the sword with your hand. Kick a guy in the shins. Kick a guy in the dick. You know, I love this one. It's like, this guy's this prominent, prestigious, world-renowned and respected battle master and tactician, and he's like, yeah, you know, lock swords with the guy and then kick him in the dick. That's you know, that's plan B. Sword versus spear, cudgels versus spear, fighting armored with a spear, fighting on horseback. This guy covered it all. Fighting with pole axes.
So there you have it. Tons of weapons, tons of varieties, all different kinds of stuff. Why aren't we seeing more of this in Hollywood? Why aren't we reading more of this in fantasy fiction? I would love to see more of it. The Bayeux Tapestry and the Flower of Battle are just two examples of documents that were created by people of that period, written hundreds of years apart, but still showing a plethora of different types of weapons. Not just the sword. The sword was definitely there, but it wasn't the only thing. What do we see most often? We see the spear most often in the Bayeux Tapestry. Let's give more love to the spear. You know, let's show more affection to pole weapons. Let's cozy up to kind of getting away from me. So that about wraps it up. More weapons to put in your arsenal if you happen to be writing a story that takes place in medieval times, be it historical or maybe it's medieval fantasy, I don't know. If you like this video, please give it a like, and as always, subscribe. I post every Thursday, and you can follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as always, you can read the first chapter of my book, A Flower in Hell, on jmchaley.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.